Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Utility Sports. Today, we're going to be taking our latest rendition of a 2021 NBA mock draft here on the channel. The season is continuing to progress. We've had some recent news, such as a head coaching change in Minnesota with Chris Finch coming in, some adjustments to the standings here as the Mavericks have gotten back to 500. The Knicks, they've shaped their roster a little bit. Some of these teams are jockeying for position here, both in the East and Western Conference. The Raptors are ascending once again. The Spurs are playing at a high level. A whole bunch of different things going on affecting the NBA draft, what the outlook looks like. So we're going to continue to look at these NBA mocks as we can go through the lottery here, get a better feel for what the order is going to look like as we progress throughout the season. So we are going to be using the current standings. Obviously, the lottery at the end could shape how this ends up looking, but let's go ahead and get started here by going into this draft machine. And the order right now is the Minnesota Timberwolves at 1, the Detroit Pistons at 2, Cleveland Cavaliers at 3, the Thunder from Houston Rockets at 4. They just released DeMarcus Cousins. 5 is the Washington Wizards. They had a 5-game win streak before their loss last night. The Oklahoma City Thunder now at 6 with their own pick. Kings picking 7. Magic are at 8. The Hawks are picking 9th. The New Orleans Pelicans are picking 10th. The Miami Heat picking 11th. The Charlotte Hornets picking 12th. The Grizzlies now at 13, and the New York Knicks from Dallas at pick 14. They are currently in their own playoff spot. The Knicks are. Dallas just on the outside looking in the Western Conference as the 9 seed. That is what the order is looking like. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to be talking about what each team could use, what each team could need moving forward. And here, if you're Minnesota, D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, we just haven't quite gotten to see them play together, to be honest. I believe they played about 5, maybe 6 games together since the trade last February that brought in D'Angelo Russell. It's been over 365 days. COVID had a big impact on the two of them not getting a lot of opportunities to play together. We really don't know what Minnesota looks like with a healthy D'Angelo Russell. However, I don't think his existence on this roster really plays too far into what they would consider at this pick if they do lock up the first overall selection here. It is going to be Cade Cunningham. He is the top player in this class. I'm very certain on that. I feel very strongly, in my opinion, on that. I thought he was head and shoulders the top guy in the class. However, Jonathan Kuminga has made splashes in the G League. He is going to be the only guy that I think can rival Cade Cunningham in this situation. He's going to give a little bit of run to that number 1 pick, but ultimately I think Cade Cunningham is number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft. So now at 2, we got the Detroit Pistons. And this is a team, they had 3 first-round picks last year, used them on Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes has that injury this year. Isaiah Stewart hasn't been giving them huge minutes, but he has been playing a bit, and Sadiq Bey has been playing fairly well as well in his minutes there in Detroit. The big guy there for them is Jeremy Grant. He has taken a step forward with his offensive production this year. However, I don't think that he ultimately plays too much into their pick. They're going to move on from Blake Griffin, whether that's through buyout or through the trade machine market. And now at this point, it's going to be about getting another forward. You can play someone next to Jeremy Grant. Grant's played the 3 and the 4 historically throughout his career. I think Jonathan Kuminga is a guy who's going to be able to do that as well. He is the second best player in this class, and the Pistons would be remiss to pass up Jonathan Kuminga here at 2 just because they have Jeremy Grant on their roster. It's got to be about taking big-time potential prospects and guys who are going to come in and impact winning immediately. Jonathan Kuminga is showing that for G League Ignite that he's capable of doing that. I think he's the most all-around player, honestly, in this class. I think his defensive presence, I think he has a lot more upside on that end than Cade Cunningham does. But I think defensively and his offensive capabilities, he's very well rounded out. And I think he's going to be a very phenomenal player in the NBA. Now at pick 3, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, those guys had started out very hot. They've cooled off quite a bit now. We see them at pick 3 here. And this is an interesting situation for them. You're looking at maybe the spot where you could see Evan Mobley going in terms of where he should be on the board. He's probably the 3rd or 4th best player in this class. However, they just acquired Jarrett Allen. I don't know if they see Mobley as a true 4 or if they see him as a smaller 5. That's kind of what I like him as, is I kind of like him as a small ball 5 a little bit, where he is a guy who can switch out into space. You have a lot of defensive versatility, and he's still got great rim protection skills and talent. I think that's really where he's best suited. So I don't necessarily know if Cleveland's the best fit for him with them having Jarrett Allen, who's still so young himself. They just gave up a first-round pick in this year's class to get him. I don't really see them going in that direction. The other issue, though, is I could see them looking at Jalen Green. And again, that's not necessarily the best fit for Cleveland here. I think that is very possible they would be a team that's motivated to move down, bring in some other future assets, try and figure out what they really want to do with this roster, give themselves a little bit more time to evaluate what they have with Sexton, Garland, Okoro, and then Jarrett Allen also being in the mix there. And we'll get to see a little bit more of that as Andre Drummond moves on from the Cavaliers. That will come whether it's at the trade deadline or immediately after in the buyout market. That's yet to be seen. But this team's very young. I think that they could afford to take a high upside risk on a guy. And Jalen Green, I think, would end up being the pick here. The guy's uber athletic. He's the most athletic player in the class, to be completely honest. And he's kind of resupplanted himself as a top 3 pick. First G League Ignite game, he came out a little rusty, didn't look the best. I think part of it was nerves. Part of it was, trying to acclimate yourself to the professional level of basketball. Didn't look great. He does have some weaknesses. He doesn't like going left as much, but he does have shot creating potential. He's an elite athlete, really good speed, can handle the ball in transition, can do a lot of different things for an NBA franchise. And I think that's going to keep him up in the top 3, maybe top 4, depending on which team kind of finds themselves at pick 3, if they're in a position for Evan Mobley, or if they want to take the risk on Jalen Green with the upside that he has on the offensive end of the floor. At pick 4, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder here, and I know that they just spent a first-round pick last year on Aleksej Pokusevski, who looks like a center, but he's kind of got such skill that you could play him at the 4. He's a little bit lean, and by a little bit, I mean quite lean. He's very, very thin. I think he's going to fill out a little bit, but I think Evan Mobley is the pick here for sure for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like I said, he's a perfect fit, in my opinion, for the modern-day NBA 5. He's athletic, can switch out into space. He moves his feet better than most centers do coming out of the draft. Look at him like Bam Adebayo, and then a little bit of that Onyeka Okongwu to him. But I think there's even more upside on the defensive end than those two yet. Even I think that he protects the rim at a very high level. For USC this year, he's averaging over 3 blocks a game. And he's just been absolutely dominant in pretty much all of their performances. He's going to be a top 4 pick in this year's draft. I would be extremely surprised if he isn't. Come NBA draft day, he will go in the top 4, and I have the Oklahoma City Thunder grabbing him here at pick 4. Now at 5, I've got the Washington Wizards, and in our most recent mock, Evan Mobley had landed there, but this recent 5-game win streak moved them up a little bit. Now they're no longer in a position to get Evan Mobley, and this is where the draft gets a little tough for Washington. I think this would be a trade-down spot as well. They have Hachimura, they have Bertans, they have Avdia, who they spent a first-round pick on last year. Russ is under contract there, and of course they don't want to move on from Bradley Beal. So that leaves the center position as the real question mark. That's why they would be motivated to go get Evan Mobley. Maybe that's a trade-down spot for the Cleveland Cavaliers if the Wizards do end up here. Maybe the Cavs get a future asset as well and move down from this spot. But now at this point, the Wizards here have to make a decision on which way they want to go. Part of me thinks Jalen Suggs is a real option. He's played so well at Gonzaga this year. He's been a huge part of their winning. They haven't lost a game for over 365 days. They've been extremely, extremely consistent and good there under head coach Mark Few at Gonzaga. But I don't necessarily know if I love the fit there next to Russ and Beal. I just don't see that as the most likely scenario. Dacian Nix is a little high for him. Josh Christopher, again, high for him. I just don't necessarily know if I see a lot of these guys being great fits. This is the toughest one to mock here in the top 10, in my opinion, just because of their need for a center. I almost find it impossible that they don't go with a center here in this draft, but there's not really a guy that really belongs there. Day'Ron Sharpe, he was a guy who was maybe on the radar as being a lottery pick. I think he's fallen off a little bit with some of UNC's struggles this year. They finally do have Josh Giddey on here too, which is something good because I've been mocking him for a while, and I had to usually pick a different guy. I don't think Josh Giddey would fit into this selection though, but I think he is a great player in general. It's kind of tough here. Kai Soto's a guy who, he's 7'2". He's got a really long wingspan, but I don't see him being a top 5 pick in this year's class either. I think part of me thinks they would just go with Jalen Johnson. He is out for the rest of the year, but I think that he's a guy who's going to be able to play in that front court. fill out some of that depth for them. I don't know if they're sold really on what they have at this point. And I think that they're just trying to, piece things together here. I really think a trade down would be the most likely situation for them at this point. But Jalen Johnson coming in at pick 5, I think that's about where his value is in this year's class. He's got good athleticism. He can affect the game in a variety of ways, and he comes in now to Washington at pick 5. At pick 6, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder. Again, they just grabbed Evan Mobley at pick 4. Now it's going to be coming and grabbing a backcourt piece to play alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and there is no one better than Jalen Suggs here to do that. He is a perfect complement to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Neither of them are necessarily true point guards, but they can both get their own shots off the dribble. They can both get to the rack consistently. They can both manipulate the pick and roll, and I think it's a perfect pairing of two combo guards who have real playmaking skills, but are also a little bit more hybrided in the fact that they can get their own shots off consistently. They like to go north-south, get to the rim. I think that Jalen Suggs and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would be a perfect backcourt pairing there in Oklahoma City, especially with the idea that they already grabbed Evan Mobley. And we're seeing the Rockets moving on from James Harden being such a disastrous thing here possibly for them in this trade, because now the Thunder could have 2 top 5 picks possibly, depending on how the lottery falls as well. This is a scary situation for the league. The Thunder, I was a little skeptical of them. However, the Rockets moving on from James Harden has opened up this to make a lot more sense than what the pick looked like it was going to be when they had initially moved on from Russell Westbrook. Now at pick 7, we've got the Sacramento Kings. And again, this is another one of those pivot points here in this first round. They just haven't been playing, extremely great this year. I think that they feel very good about their backcourt. Tyrese Halliburton's going to probably finish top 3 in Rookie of the Year, voting De'Aaron Fox near all-star level guard, in my opinion. It's about kind of filling in that front court. But again, like I said, this class just isn't that conducive for front court level players. I don't know what I really see for them moving forward. I think Harrison Barnes is a guy who might get traded this deadline, especially to a team like the Boston Celtics. I think that with their trade exception, they'll be interested in making a move for Harrison Barnes, possibly. Marvin Bagley, his dad, had already said he wants out of Sacramento. Will he get his way out? I don't know that for sure. And Rashawn Holmes, I think he's a quality rotational big. Same with Hassan Whiteside, but I don't think either of those two are real building blocks there in Sacramento. So there's a lot of questions in that front court. And ultimately for them at this point, I think that they go with Greg Brown out of Texas. He's a guy who is a real big hit or miss prospect, in my opinion. He's got a lot of potential, not only as a finisher around the rim, extremely athletic guy, but also as a guy who can be a tough shot maker at that 3 or 4 position in the NBA. I think he provides rare athleticism in a way that is going to be pretty helpful there in Sacramento, getting someone who can play off the ball, off of De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. I think he fits in quite well in the youth movement there in Sacramento. At pick 8, we got the Orlando Magic, and now this team, they have been battling. Nikola Vucevic deserves a lot of credit this year for kind of keeping this team afloat to the level that they are, just because they're missing Jonathan Isaac all year. They're missing Markelle Fultz, their starting point guard. Evan Fournier, I don't know if his future is going to be back there in Orlando or not. So now looking at what we're seeing with Orlando, they did extend Fultz and Isaac. So those are 2 pieces that we can count on them having next year alongside Nikola Vucevic. Will Aaron Gordon be back? I don't know. I'm not sold on that yet. And I'm almost certain Evan Fournier won't be back. So now I'm looking at this team and I'm trying to figure out which way that they could possibly go on draft night. They don't necessarily need a point guard, but I do think that they need someone who can, one, space the floor for them. I think that they need to improve their shooting around the perimeter, especially off of Vucevic when he gets his post touches. And that's going to be Moses Moody for me out of Arkansas. Arkansas now getting known to be producing shooters that can come into the NBA. Isaiah Joe is playing for the 76ers at this point. He's a shooter that came out of Arkansas last year. Moses Moody, an even better shooter and an even better all-around player, in my opinion. This is probably the high end of where we could see Moses Moody go on draft night. Pick 8's a little high, but I think that the fit here in Orlando makes the most sense. They could also maybe be looking at a way to move down, maybe shift down to about 10 to 12 area and then feel like they could still get Moses Moody. But I think that he's a great fit there in Orlando. Now at pick 9, we got the Atlanta Hawks. And this is a team that had high expectations coming into the season. And they just haven't quite, clicked yet. The injury to DeAndre Hunter definitely didn't help them. He's missed quite a bit of time. Cam Reddish is all right. Bogdanovich got injured as well. And now there's rumors about John Collins, if he's going to be an Atlanta Hawk long-term or not. The 23-year-old near all-star level player, they are shopping him it does sound like. Will he be back with Atlanta? I'm not sold on that. That's going to actually play into the way I look at going about this pick here for the Atlanta Hawks. I think that they need to add some forward depth. I think that they've got their backcourt pretty well solved. Bring in Bogdanovich. They have Rondo. They've got Trae Young, obviously, being the franchise piece there for them. I was surprised he did not make the All-Star game. Now it's going to be about finding a forward that really fits into what this group is trying to do. And at this point, there's a few different options for sure. Scotty Lewis is one. He's been playing very well for Florida. However, he is a sophomore. That might hurt his draft stock a little bit. He might find himself a little bit lower than some of these freshmen. And additionally, I think two guys that are really on the radar here would be Scott Barnes and Zaire Williams. Scott Barnes is an athletic defensive wing. He can give you some two-way potential. And Zaire Williams is a guy who I actually really like here in Atlanta. But the issue is we haven't gotten to see Bogdan with Trae Young as much, because part of the reason of bringing him in was to get another guy who's capable of handling the ball and moving it. Zaire Williams does that for you at the power forward position. I think that he could fit well into what Atlanta is trying to do there with Lloyd Pierce. And I ultimately think that is going to be the way that I look to go if I'm Atlanta, is with Zaire Williams. I think he's a more complete player than Scott Barnes. I think he's a guy who's going to be able to come in and fit into what Atlanta's trying to do with their ball movement and giving some more options to that offense other than just having Trae Young have high pick and rolls, which I think, is a really good starting point for them. But I think diversifying that offense a little bit more there in Atlanta does make a lot of sense. Now at pick 10, we've got the New Orleans Pelicans, and they're a team that I have a lot of question marks about as well. I don't think Eric Bledsoe is going to be back. I think Lonzo Ball could be on his way out. Steven Adams, they had paid to get him. I didn't love that acquisition in the moment. They do have two huge key building blocks, though, in Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. They also spent a first-round pick last year on Kyra Lewis Jr. How do they go about, really moving forward with this team? JJ Redick is also going to be a free agent at the end of the season, and I think that they could look two ways here. They could look at a big upside pick in BJ Boston. I think that they're a team that they have that young core together. They could maybe risk going with BJ Boston. If it doesn't work out, it's okay, because they have such a nice young core of pieces already. Or they could look at Corey Kispert, who is a shooter out of Gonzaga. He has a career 40% shooting percentage. Now, yes, I know he's a senior. I understand that that doesn't look like the best pick in terms of what his age is. I don't think that he has super high potential in the NBA. But just looking at this roster, they need some floor spacing, and I don't really see a way that they're going to be able to address that as much in free agency. They're going to lose out on JJ Redick more than likely, whether it's this trade deadline or this next offseason. He's going to want to go to a contending team. And the Pelicans just aren't that in the short term. I think Corey Kispert is the JJ Redick replacement as they continue to try and keep this spacing around their young duo of Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. Now at pick 11 here, we got the Miami Heat. And this team, they've been underperforming. I think that they'll find themselves out of the situation where they're at right now, where they just don't have, the team that's competing at a high level. But if they do find themselves up here, I think that they do end up going with Scotty Barnes out of Florida State. He stays in state here in Miami. And I think that he kind of fits into that role that they need as a guy who can play the 3 or 4, can give you a little bit of floor spacing, but ultimately is a defensive presence next to Jimmy Butler. I had thought they were really going to miss Jay Crowder when he departed for Phoenix. I was surprised that they didn't try harder to bring him back there with what his impact was in the bubble. But Scotty Barnes is going to be the young replacement for him if they do stay up in the lottery here in this year's NBA draft. At pick 12, we got the Charlotte Hornets, and they're a team that could very well play themselves into a playoff position as well. Teams like the New York Knicks are very close. They could close that gap. Gordon Hayward's a really great player. LaMelo Ball is looking like the rookie of the year at this point. And now the Hornets are going to be about finding players that fit around those two guys. BJ Boston's a real possibility here. They could take that high upside pick. However, I think that they'll also be looking very closely at that center position. This class just isn't conducive for that, though. In my opinion, I just don't see a lot of guys that are worth taking in the lottery at the center spot this year in this draft class. Cam Thomas, he's a scorer. I don't think he's going to be up in the lottery either, but I think he would be a nice late grab for some team. Now, looking at this board, this is the issue that I've been talking about. There's just not a true center. Usman Garuba, he's just not going to be a lottery pick. Also, the guy I talked about earlier out of UNC, Darren Sharp, he is not going to be a lottery pick in my opinion. Isaiah Todd, does he have a shot at being a lottery pick? I think that is possible. However, I don't necessarily know if I see that either. So now at this point, it's kind of hard to really necessarily mock what I could see the Hornets doing. They've got a logjam at guard with Rozier, Graham, and Ball. They've got their forwards of the future with Hayward and Washington. So it's kind of like a pick 'em here of if you want to go high potential guy. And I think that maybe they are the team that swings on BJ Boston now at this point. I don't necessarily love this. I don't think that they need a guard, but I think he kind of fits as a combo guard forward in the NBA with his size and his length. And I know, trust me, I know he hasn't been performing great at Kentucky. I'm not saying he's necessarily worth a lottery pick, but teams are going to be sold and executives are going to be sold on possible potential with him, especially when they look at his frame, his some of his highlights, some of what he can do with the ball in his hands is very impressive. It's about putting it together. Remember, Cam Reddish had a terrible year at Duke in his freshman season. He still went in the lottery. I think BJ Boston could be following a similar trajectory with his career when it comes to staying a high draft pick because of what he was in high school and what some of the expectations are for him based off of his frame. Now, at pick 13, we got the Memphis Grizzlies here. And it's just been a tough go for them this year because Jaren Jackson Jr. has been out. So with him out, that's their second best player. This team is much better than they've played so far just because of that injury. He hasn't come back from that meniscus tear yet. Once he comes back, this team will be better, but I think it's going to be about trying to find guys who can fit around Ja Morant and give them a little bit of something that they don't have yet at this point. And to me, that's Josh Christopher. That's a high athletic guy, someone who can play off the ball and gives you a bench scorer at this point that can come in behind Dylan Brooks, gives you a little bit of versatility in that backcourt. And I really like him out of Arizona State. I know he's not the best three-point shooter at this point. He's been very streaky this year for the Sun Devils, but I think there is a lot of potential there for him in an offense where he doesn't have to be the lead ball handler. I think Ja Morant, with his playmaking ability, could help Josh Christopher rise as a scorer in the NBA as well. I think Josh Christopher staying in the lottery here does make quite a bit of sense. And now at pick 14, we got the New York Knicks. This pick coming from the Dallas Mavericks. And now it's looking like this pick could be out of the lottery or will be in the back end of the lottery. So which way does New York really want to go about this? Mitchell Robinson being out doesn't help their situation. That kind of makes their playoff run a little bit tougher. Julius Randle's been playing at a high level. RJ Barrett's a building block there. And I think outside of that, they're going to be looking for another high upside guy. And that's going to be, in my opinion, if I can find where he went, Josh Giddey right there. He's playing in the NBL. He's a guy who might be a triple-double machine. He's got great size to him. He's about a 6'7", 6'8" point guard. And I think he's got legitimate ball skills and a guy who could actually run his show for a team. And I think Tom Thibodeau is going to love bringing in a bigger physical guard, someone that can fit into what he wants to do defensively as well. I think that Josh Giddey is the pick. And that concludes our NBA mock draft through the lottery here. Look at the picks here. We got Cade Cunningham headlining the draft as the first overall pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, yes, remember, the lottery will shape up what the order looks like. So make sure you guys are subscribed to not miss out on future NBA mocks, especially as the season progresses. Some of the orders change, and we'll have the lottery at some point as well, really shaping what the NBA draft could look like. This is the best place to be for NBA mock draft coverage. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up, and we'll catch you in the next one.